I'm going to get started. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Beautiful day, so I really appreciate you guys sacrificing some of this amazing weather to come hear me talk. I wouldn't have done that for me, so I appreciate it. We're here today to introduce the Climate Action Roadmap, which has been finalized by the Climate Action Planning Committee and is now available for the town to consider in terms of priorities and recommendations going forward. So I think I want to start just by saying that this has been a really amazing collective process that we embarked upon 2 years ago. The Select Board commissioned us a couple of years ago. I'll go through the calendar in a second, but it's been for me, it's been a bit of a labor of love. I know it's been something that a lot of people have thought about for many, many years and wanted to see happen. This is something I hope that everybody's proud of. And that we can look at it collectively as an example of Needham leading on climate change. So without further ado, I'm going to go through some slides. There's not too many here. I don't want to kill you with PowerPoint. Afterwards, if you have questions, we'll have time for Q&A. We are going to end no later than 7 o'clock. We do not have this room after 7 o'clock. We've agreed to vacate it by then, so no lingering. Get outside and enjoy the weather. All right, so I mentioned that we got started about 2 years ago. The committee formed, and I do want to just talk about the holistic process, how that even happened. So there's a lot of talk about doing a climate action plan, but I want to credit Green Needham for presenting a very compelling case to the Select Board a couple of years ago that convinced them that this was something that was worth doing and that it was something that we could do. The Select Board did form this committee and chartered us specifically with writing a climate action plan, right? So that was what we were just asked to do. Over the past couple of years, we worked on the plan. We did a first pass in 2022. One of the key milestones for us was actually just figuring out where our carbon emissions come from, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, but that's what a GHG inventory is, a greenhouse gas inventory. Who's producing, where, or how are we producing carbon dioxide and equivalent gases, and how. So that collection was in 2023. We began working with a consultant in early 2023 to start refining goals and strategies which would feed into this plan. And I want to thank town meeting, any town meeting members in the room. That was largely due to your yes vote on a funding for a consultant to work with us to go through that process. So thank you for that. That really helped us stay on schedule. We had the draft roadmap late last year. We went through public comment early this year, and then we just finished adjusting the final draft and presenting that to the Select Board within the last month. That's our timeline. That's how we got here. I do recall at one point Marianne Cooley telling me that everything in town takes 2 years, and she's right. It takes 2 years. So the other thing I want to call out is how many people participated in this process. So we have actually over 70 people who are acknowledged in the Climate Action Roadmap themselves. And they're Needham residents, they're local community group volunteers, business owners and representatives from businesses, members of town committees and board members, town staff. We have some here with us today. High school and college students have participated, communities of faith leaders, and of course, KLA Associates, the consultant that helped us through the final stages of this process. So this really was a collective effort. We got a lot of great feedback and discussion along the way that went into the final product. And it's also a theme that I hope people hold on to, because the roadmap is just a roadmap. It's nothing more than a piece of document unless we all collectively start working together to implement it. It's going to be a community effort. It's not a simple problem to solve. It's not something that Needham town can solve alone, and it's not something that individuals alone can solve. It's a collective effort. So I'm glad to see the amount of collaboration that went in to start. So I'm going to start with why we took action and why is there a climate action roadmap? And there's a variety of different reasons. One is to ensure that Needham reduces its contribution to climate change. So we're not going to solve climate change in this town. But we're also not going to solve climate change if every town says, I'm not going to solve climate change. Then nobody's going to start. We have to start. We have to clean up our own backyard. And that's what this is about. But it's not just about solving climate change. There's actual costs associated to climate change, as anybody who had flooding in the last couple of years would attest. We can save money and resources by addressing climate change. We can help preserve our history, our culture, our quality of life, all of which can be impacted negatively by climate change. And then there's both the current and the coming climate impacts. So we all have seen, I hope we've read recently, that 2023 was again the hottest year on record, and it was now above the 1.5 degrees of warming, global warming, that scientists have said we should avoid. So it is continuing to increase its impacts and will continue to do so unless we address it collectively. There's many members of town who've asked for this, and so that's another reason we're doing it. And then lastly, but legally, we are trying to comply with Massachusetts state law that says that the state needs to be climate neutral by 2050, greenhouse gas neutral. So those are the whys. We also, last year, did a survey to ask Needham opinions on climate change. This was a non-scientific survey, I do want to point that out. But 92% of respondents did agree that climate change is happening, and 82% think the town of Needham should do more to reduce its impact. That was our survey. Now, there is a scientific survey by the Yale Opinion Survey on Climate Change, which are very similar in their results. So this was done in 2021. They estimated that about 72% of people in our county believe that climate change is an urgent issue that needs to be addressed. So just want to say that this is something that's on a lot of people's minds. So what will climate change in Needham look like? Well, we know it's already here, and as I mentioned, we've already experienced some of its impacts in localized flooding and droughts, lack of snow. Anybody who's a skier, 70% increase in the amount of precipitation falling in heavy rain events between 1958 and 2010. So it's one of the major impacts of climate change is that there's more moisture in the atmosphere because the atmosphere is warmer, and therefore when we have storms, it drops more water more quickly, like 6 inches an hour, which will overwhelm even the best drainage systems. A few years ago, we also had drought. So I think a lot of people remember when our lawns dried up and our gardens died a couple of years ago before the flooding. So it is here. It is forecast to get worse, and we need to do something about it. I'd never want to assume that everybody understands the mechanics of global warming and climate change. So just a very brief primer, if this is new to you. Basically, the sun sends infrared rays down to us, and it hits our planet. Some of it gets absorbed by the material on the planet, but a lot of it reflects back up into space. Our carbon dioxide layer traps some of that infrared radiation and keeps us warm. So actually, we need CO2 to survive. Without it, we would become an ice planet. But that layer has gotten thicker and thicker as we've burned more fossil fuels. The thicker it gets, just like a blanket, the more heat it traps. And that's what's happening. That's the mechanics behind climate change and why we're seeing temperatures continue to increase. So we talk about carbon dioxide. And so one of the key questions is, what is a metric ton of carbon dioxide? Because I'm going to show you some figures in a second about how many metric tons Needham creates. So to begin with, a metric ton of carbon dioxide would fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and that would be all carbon dioxide. That's what 1 metric ton visualized of carbon looks like. And on average, I'm missing a word here, each Needham resident fills 10 pools with carbon dioxide every year. So that's our contribution individually to carbon. Collectively, we're putting about 342,000 metric tons of carbon into the atmosphere every year. And so again, 10 swimming pools per person. It's not equally divided, as we know. But it is coming from 3 primary sources. One is our homes, the residential buildings where we live. So primarily in the fossil fuels we burn in order to keep them warm, or to cook, or to dry our clothes, right? Those are the sources in residential buildings. Transportation is another very large source, and that's our cars, our buses, our trucks, et cetera. About a third of the carbon that we put into the atmosphere is coming from transportation. And a quarter is coming from commercial and municipal buildings. Larger buildings, we have fewer of them, but they still produce about a quarter of our total carbon dioxide. One thing I do want to point out is that only 3% of our total carbon comes from buildings or vehicles owned by the town of Needham. So earlier I said, there's no way town of Needham can solve this by itself. We can't just ask the staff to decarbonize all of its buildings and to decarbonize all its vehicles, and we're there. We would solve 3% of the problem. So it is a much bigger problem than sometimes people expect. There's other sources, natural gas leaks. You probably smell them sometimes when you're walking around town. That's a very large source of our carbon emissions. And then solid waste and wastewater is another major one. So what if we did nothing? If we did nothing at all as a town, there are some things that are going to happen no matter what. One of them is that the grid is going to decarbonize, because the state has a plan to decarbonize the electricity grid. So if we did nothing, we would still be producing 270,000 metric tons in 2050 when we are required by statute to be at net zero. So that would not be a good thing for us to do. However, if we follow a very carefully crafted climate action roadmap and make wise collective choices when things are, for example, a vehicle is no longer drivable and we need to replace the vehicle, or when a building's furnace is about to die, if we make choices at those key points in time over the next several years, we can get to net zero. And that's what this roadmap is designed to really help us visualize and plan for. Planning is the key. So the climate action roadmap has 6 key focus areas. We talk about clean energy. We talk about governance. How do we hold ourselves accountable and also make sure that we're transparent in the types of decisions we're making? There's natural resources and waste management issues that are summarized. We are working towards net zero buildings. There's also resilience, public health. We're not going to forestall the worst. We're not going to forestall worse impacts of climate change. So we need to be thinking about public health and how do we make our town more resilient to those climate change impacts. And then transportation. And each one of these areas has a whole set of actions. And if you look through it, it seems like an overwhelming list of actions. One thing I want to point out as you do look at this PDF, so I'm showing you some just snippets from the spreadsheet, from the roadmap itself, but when you open it up, you'll see these lists and you'll see some icons, and the icons are there to tell you whether or not this is something that's a high priority item for us, as suggested by experts in the Climate Action Planning Committee's votes. Is it something that's in process? So we might actually be doing it already, and it might actually be completed. So it's a long list. It's not going to get done in a year. It's not going to get done in 5 years. It's going to evolve. We're going to work our way through it. So what happens now that we have this? So as I've mentioned, it's a roadmap. It's just a set of recommended actions. This is not a mandate for anybody to do. It does not take the place of the public meeting and decision-making process that exists in the town of Needham. So every board who's responsible for potentially making one of these changes needs to go through its own process to whether or not, on when to do it and how to do it. So town leaders will take the lead on implementing recommended actions on an annual basis, weighing those actions against other town priorities. And then each action will go through the standard town decision-making process. So that includes anything that needs an appropriation would have to go through finance committee, it would have to go to a town meeting vote. Any actions that require town staff time, boards or committees would require prioritization in that area before it can work. So I want to be clear on that, what this is and what it's not. This is not a mandate. That said, I think, as I said before, I hope you're proud of this roadmap, that we have this and it's showing that we're leading. You should also be proud of the way that the town has actually already stepped up on this. So we have been writing it for 2 years. In those 2 years, we have, along the way, identified key, specific, high priority items that we knew at the end of the day were going to be prioritized, and we recommended them to the select board or the planning board in the case of some bylaws that needed amending. And those were adopted. So 3 of the 4 have already been completed. The one that I think I'm most thrilled about is that we have a sustainability manager, and if you've never met our sustainability manager, Gabby, do you mind standing up and just waving real quick? So Gabby's been with us for a few months and has already been doing a huge amount of work on securing grants and helping town staff with key projects and priorities that are related to sustainability. And I think it's one of the things that I'm most thrilled about is that Gabby's here. And it's not just that we have a sustainability manager, we have a great person in it. So that was one of the key things that was completed in the last year. Those of you in town meeting may know that we adopted the opt-in specialized energy code, which has increased efficiency mandates, and it also nudges builders to go all electric, and that goes into effect on July 1st of this year. We voted in last year, but it goes into effect this year. And then we updated the town's zoning and permitting bylaws to reduce some barriers around solar, particularly around commercial rooftops and then solar canopies over parking lots. There were some other changes in that bylaw, but those were the priorities that the Climate Action Planning Committee had asked the planning board to take on, and they put a lot of thought into it, and we're very excited about that bylaw. In fact, I had a builder just recently tell me that he's considering putting in ground-based solar to support one of his projects, so that was exciting. And then lastly, we're in the process of developing a municipal electricity aggregation program. And so that's a program that allows the town to negotiate with electricity suppliers on behalf of all residents and businesses in Needham. In doing so, we can get more favorable rates when we do these bulk negotiations. And when we're looking for these lower rates, we can also ask for greener electricity. That's a plan that has been it's been outlined, and we went through a public process in Needham. It has now been submitted to the state for review. They had their own public process. So now we're in a queue to wait to see if our plan will be approved. If it is approved, you'll be hearing a lot more about it once it is. But it'll be something that hopefully would allow all of you to take advantage of favorable rates for greener electricity. This year, the Climate Action Plan is recommending that the town take 4 additional actions. And so these will be transmitted to the select board. They were voted at the last Climate Action Plan committee meeting. And so there's one is, as we mentioned, so much of our carbon emissions come from our homes and our transportation and from our businesses that we want to really help spread the word that there are programs and options people have that allow them to decarbonize. And so that's one of the key recommendations we're asking to be brought forward. There's a program called PACE that it's very wonky, but really it just helps building owners finance any green energy projects, which otherwise might be difficult for them to do because they have to kind of personally be on the hook for any loans. So PACE allows them to attach the betterment assessment for the loan, the project, onto the building that they're putting it on. There's an EV first policy that would essentially, if passed, would ask that any procurements of vehicles for the town start first with an EV as the assumption, as opposed to the possible. And then if there's no EVs that are affordable, available, or able to perform the function that's required of the vehicle, then they can go for a non-EV. And then lastly, we're recommending that the town adopt and protect our tree canopy, which today absorbs 5% of our emissions every year. So we have a pretty healthy canopy in Needham, but we could lose it. And that's a pretty big carbon sink for us if we lose it. So that's it. That's our plan. As I mentioned, this is something that many people participated in. It is now the town's plan. It's something that we look forward to the town deliberating on, acting upon, and keeping up to date going forward. And I'll stop here and ask if you have any questions. Yes. No. Commercial and municipal, but almost all commercial. Yeah. So that number is net of that solar production. But again, it's only 3% of all of the carbon emissions in Needham come from town buildings and vehicles. So we're talking about 1.5% maybe for the buildings here. It's very low relative to the total amount of carbon in Needham is coming from these buildings. Solar is helping lower that number, but it's not, if we didn't have the solar, it's just, there's not that many buildings. We see them, they're visible, they're big. Some of them, like the Public Service Administration building, is already a geothermal powered building. So it has a very low carbon footprint. We're looking at increasing, and Sunita Williams has solar on its roof as well. It's just that if you think about how many houses there are in Needham and then how many businesses there are, it dwarfs the number of public buildings and vehicles. That's what. Putting the solar up. Right. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one reason why people don't put solar on roofs. Sometimes it doesn't face the wrong way or they have tree cover. There's a variety of different reasons why people might not be able to make that investment in solar. I would say that the one option that is probably going to be interesting to you is when we have that municipal aggregation program, because what you're trying to do often by putting solar on your roof is to decarbonize your electricity. There are other ways to decarbonize your electricity. One would be our green municipal aggregation when it's available. Another one is community solar, is something that there are some programs around where they're putting up solar farms elsewhere and then selling the electricity into residents and businesses. And so if you're interested in that, we can maybe connect offline. Maybe Green Needham can also connect with you on that. I know there are some people who are experts on community solar. Okay, so that's another, some people, is it a community wind or is it a, okay, good. Thank you. Do you mind just introducing yourself for a little quick?
Hey, my name is Paul Malta. I'm on the Mobility Planning Coordination Committee, and I'm a co-chair, or I have a seat on the Sustainability Committee as a result. I wanted to ask about what efforts have been done to electrify the school buses, if that's an area of focus. I know that Needham itself doesn't own the buses, I guess, but, or do you? And if so, what?
Michael, would you be interested in answering that question? So Michael Grice, School Committee, and also Green Needham President.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of working that direction, but we first have to install the necessary charging infrastructure, and that's like a level 3 charger, which is a much more expensive. So there's a lot of planning that has to go into that with the town to do that, because we would need that level of charging to be ensure that we could have school buses that are charged sufficiently, because they have to be charged constantly every day. So we are working in that direction. Our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Ann Galati, and I have been working on this for a while. So that's kind of the plan is, and she actually has in our 5-year plan, it may be a little further out because of this requirement to do the first school bus, hopefully in some number of years. But we need that infrastructure so they can be charged first.
So town meeting did approve the infrastructure this spring at the last town meeting, correct? Yes. I'm sorry, just wait for the mic because then we can hear on TV.
So my name is Lynn Klatt. I'm just wondering, is there any plan for Needham to have its own community solar? And when would that happen if you were planning it?
I don't think we have any discussions at this point for community solar. We don't have a lot of land in Needham that would be available for solar. So that one of the problems with community solar is if you don't have available land, then you have to cut down trees. And that's a little bit at odds with what we're also trying to do is preserve our tree canopy. There are parts of Massachusetts where they're looking at fallow farm fields, for example, as a good source for solar. So I think at this time, we're probably not going to consider that, but we'll keep our mind open. Yeah. Just hanging on the back row there.
Hi, I'm Joan Montgomery Halford. Given the high percentage, the highest percentage of greenhouse gases coming from residential buildings, I was wondering if you could just speak a little more specifically about the in-process opt-in incentivization you mentioned on an earlier slide that's occurring with new residential developers in Needham.
Sure. So I believe it was fall 2000, what's this, 2024 right now, 2023, we adopted the opt-in specialized code. So what that says is that there's different categories of construction, and you can have homes that are above 4,000 square feet and homes that are below 4,000 square feet. And depending on whether or not you have a fossil fuel free construction, so you have no gas stove, you have no gas furnace, et cetera. If you go fossil fuel free, you build it to this efficiency standard, right? If you want to put fossil fuels in that building, you need to build it to a higher level of efficiency. And what they're saying is if you're going to heat it with fossil fuels, we'll at least reduce the amount of fossil fuels that you're going to burn to keep it warm. And so that was a state code that was offered to towns, and towns that adopted it, then there's like a 6-month waiting period, a little over 6 months, that it goes into effect. And then after that, any buildings any building permits that are pulled will have to adhere to that code. And it's a code that's sort of like the base code plus, we already have the certain code at the state. This just takes it up to another level. And that's what that code was designed to do. So, good question. We have right here. On the specialized code, I don't have that number. I can find out. Yeah, because there's the stretch code. The stretch code is very high. That was the code before the specialized code. The specialized code, I don't believe it's that high, but lower. Yeah.
It's 44 communities right now.
44 communities.
But the percent.
Oh, by
Yes.
percentage of population. Yes.
Yes, the population is greater than that. Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Good point. I think we had a question right here.
I'm trying to clarify. This is stricter than the stretch code?
Hang on just a sec. Could you answer your question?
So, wait, the specialized code is stricter than the stretch code, is that correct?
That's right. So if you think of the codes as stacking on each other, you have the base code, which every community in Massachusetts has to build to. Then you have a stretch code, which is more efficient, though in some ways they're on par now. But it was a way of pushing the needle further on efficiency. That stretch code is over 300 communities have adopted that. The specialized code focuses only on new construction and is designed to really help trying to push not just efficiency, but electrification. And so, but it's saying you still have the choice to build fossil fuels or not fossil fuels, But if you build fossil fuels, you need to build that to an even higher efficiency standard. If you build without fossil fuels, you can build right to the same code. In essence, that's what they're saying. Yeah. Over here. Yeah. Just a second, let's get the mic here.
I believe one of the ideas in your proposal was to increase the tree canopy. What is recommended, because what I've seen the past several years is every new developer who tears down a 1951 house tears down all the mature trees, and there is no tree canopy. And I believe in Needham, you don't need a permit to cut down a tree. So what is recommended to increase the tree canopy?
Yeah, so we're recommending that the town consider adopting a tree bylaw that would help protect that canopy. There are specific boards that will be involved with that. We're just making the recommendation. So it'll be up to the boards involved with adopting that to decide how to go about it. It's a very complicated issue, as you might guess, because you've got property rights, you've got people with investments in their homes who might be worried about trees hitting their homes. You've also got people who are worried about the canopy, and then groups like Climate Action Planning Committee who are concerned about the carbon capture that those trees represent. So a lot of those things need to be weighed, and there'll be a very thoughtful public process before any bylaw gets passed. We are just recommending that the town prioritize that for a lot of those reasons. Yeah.
Kim Nickel, I'm a resident. Can you just add some clarification to that? So, for example, are there any nearby communities who have created decent bylaws to protect the tree canopy?
Yes, there are several communities that have adopted bylaws. I think that'll be part of that public process, is identifying who they are, communicating with them, talking with the leaders and residents and business owners in those towns and cities to find out what went well, what didn't go well, what of the mistakes been made.
Wellesley,
Yeah, Wellesley.
Lexington, Arlington, Cambridge has a very robust, yeah.
Good, thanks.
So we're very similar. We have a house that's over 100 years old. It will definitely be torn down when we sell it. No plan to sell it right now, but it's very choppy. The rooms are all separate. So to put in heat pumps is very expensive. So is there any technology right now looking at like a catalytic converter to put on your chimney or to put on, to sort of decrease your...
That's a good question. I don't know whether or not there's a way the carbon capture sort of at the home level.
Yeah, I think for people that are buying wood stoves now, I think wood stoves now come with a catalytic converter.
Yeah, but you're thinking for your furnace, for your
Yeah,
boiler.
on our chimney, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
we
a
have
good
gas
question.
coming in.
I don't know if anybody here have any expertise in that, because I've never heard of anything like that. I'm looking at people that I think would know, and they're shaking their head. Yeah, that's very expensive. So one of the things that we've tried to do in the last couple of years is point out some of these things to our statewide and U.S. representatives, that there are a lot of barriers like this that exist, especially for old homes. A lot of the technology that's being developed is being developed for new homes or for homes that are built in other parts of the United States, and they're not really thinking about these 100-year-old homes. There are, window mount heat pumps that I've seen. I don't really know a lot about whether or not they're as good as some of the ones that require mini splits, ducts, and the like. My expectation is that I'm speaking as a business student, as there's more investment in this, you're going to see more innovation. And when there's more innovation and there's more competition, we should see better products at better prices. That's the economic theory behind this. I think what the state and the federal government have been doing and putting a lot of these programs in place is to help push the market forward fast, right? Increase a lot of demand. You increase a lot of demand, you get a lot of suppliers innovating and trying to chase after those consumers. People who have 100-year-old homes might not be their first customers, but maybe will trickle down in time. Right now, I think it's a tough one. And we live in a 1930s home. We went to heat pumps, and it was extraordinarily expensive, and it was extraordinarily difficult, and it was, it was a hassle. We were personally motivated to do so, but I don't think that you can expect most people to go down that road. And so we have to keep pushing our elected leaders to figure out other ways to get rid of these barriers. So, good
Also,
question.
just make a plug that for folks who are thinking about electrification of their homes, we're very fortunate in Needham that Green Needham has developed an energy coaching program. So if you haven't taken advantage of that yet, I'd strongly encourage you to go to their website and check out the energy coaching program. It's nice sometimes to have someone else to kind of talk through these potential options and kind of weigh some of the costs and benefits. So just want to recognize that wonderful program.
I'll third it. Here.
Hi, Daniel Callahan. I think I'm just relating to the last question. I think I've seen something on a whole house heat pumps if you have forced hot air system. Do you know
So
anything about that?
yes. If you have ductwork in your home already, that's one of the biggest expenses to going to a ducted system is putting ducts in if you don't have them.
But
And if you don't have ducts, then you mini splits are usually the default, right? Mini splits are those things on the wall that blow hot or cold. But if you have chopped up houses with small rooms, you need a lot of them. And then if you need a lot of them, it's harder for you to heat or cool.
But I'm talking about a whole house heat pump if you have
If you have the ductwork. If you have the ductwork, you're probably a good candidate for either air source or ground source heat pumps, depending on how much land you have. But again, as Gabby was saying, if you're interested, Green Needham has this energy coaching. We've actually both been trained as energy coaches as well, but we're learning also from a member of Green Needham who's been doing this for a number of years. Thank you. Other questions?
Matt Tuttleman. Everyone, it's great to have the engagement. So first of all, thank you everyone for being engaged. Just to help elaborate on the stuff that we're just saying about Green Needham, you all should know that through Mass Save, right, which we all fund through our electric rates, everyone can get a home energy audit every 2 years at no cost. To Daniel's point, the whole home incentive right now, if you were to replace an entire HVAC system, is $15,000. And there's a lesser one for partial at like $5,000 a ton, right? So there's significant money out there from Mass Save to subsidize that. In addition to that, there is a program through Mass Save called the Heat Loan Program that you can access up to $50,000 for the replacement of your HVAC system, domestic hot water, and if you're so inclined to put a battery in your house, $50,000 at 0% interest on a 7-year note. So free cost of capital, not free money. And then lastly, most of these measures, solar, energy storage, and the ground source heat pumps all qualify for the federal investment tax credit, which is a 30% subsidy off of those costs. So although these are expensive investments in your home, many of our home appliances only have a 15-year useful life. They'll last longer than that, but you're going to have higher operating and maintenance costs. So if you can think about replacing those things in a proactive strategy and leveraging all these things in the market, you won't have to make a decision when your air conditioning goes out or your heat goes out under duress. So just a helpful way to know that there's a lot of stuff in the market that is there to help you with these decisions.
Thanks, Matt. So I think the key point is there are a lot of resources out there for people who want to decarbonize. There's a couple of details in there I'm not going to quibble with because there are some nuances between air source and ground source heat pumps. But if you are interested, I think one of the other key benefits of having both Green Needham and now a sustainability manager in town is that you have two sources of information that are not coming from vendors. And I have nothing against vendors. We have the wonderful vendors here in Needham, but I think it's always, I got to take it with a grain of salt what's coming here, and I'm not sure who to trust. The great I think one of the great advantages of having a sustainability manager is we have a source of truth. We have a source we can trust who's not pushing one way or another to a specific solution. And then Green Needham as well with the energy coaching program. So take advantage of those. And then the last point I would say is planning. Don't wait until your furnace is dying. It's something that takes a while. I can tell you months of discussions before you're ready to put in one of these. So don't wait until your boiler or your furnace dies. Other questions? I can see people are watching the sun go down and thinking, you gotta get out there. One more.
In addition to the vehicles for the town, can you talk a little bit about the electrification of lawn mowers and leaf blowers, and what sort of pressure the town is putting on landscaping companies to do that?
So there is an action in the roadmap that recommends that we put in some potential bylaws to decarbonize landscaping, right? Lawn mowing equipment. It's not a high priority. We did not recommend it to be handled urgently because we're focusing on the biggest source of carbon. Right now, that's our buildings, our cars, our electricity, right? Those are the big ones. So those, since we can't do everything at once, those are the ones we prioritize. There is, however, a community group that has organized around primarily leaf blowers, but maybe more broadly around some of the lawn equipment. And they were considering a bylaw, a citizens petition bylaw. I think they'd push that back. But if that's something you're interested in, you can certainly meet with that group. I would point out that there's probably a difference between residential and commercial equipment readiness for decarbonization at this point. So if we go down that road, it's something that I think we want to make sure we don't drive every landscaper out of Needham, because a lot of people who have, some people wouldn't mind it, but there are probably a lot of people who would. So I think it's another one of those topics that has two edges to it, right? Could you get the mic back? Sorry.
It just requires a little bit more planning. You can't have the energy density of a tank of gas. It just requires a little bit more planning in terms of batteries that you have on board. I mean, I guess I would encourage folks to think beyond CO2, right? Particulate emission is a big deal. And I think in terms of sustainability, I think that's something that should be, if not on par with CO2, a close second.
Right.
And those engines are not regulated.
Right.
So.
Right. We are seeing some movement. I know the town already has an electric ride-on mower. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but that was procured, I think, about a year and a half ago. I heard the only complaint with it is it's not heavy enough that he could see the lines. And so he sometime went over the same place twice. And I was like, that's a pretty minor complaint. He said he had no problem with the power with cutting, and it had no power with lasting long enough to get the job done. So there's potential there. Other questions? Back row there.
My name is Bill Sloan. I am also one of these people that own a house that was built in '51. There must have been a number of them. But I have had very good luck with putting solar panels on my roof, and an insufficient number where I actually get a payback at the end of the year because I produce more energy than I use. The SREC program has certainly helped, and I understand that's probably diminished. But I think the economics for somebody with an older house, there still may be an economic feasibility that will work if you're going to own the house, if you're going to stay in it long enough where you can essentially pay for your investment with savings. Perhaps it would still make sense, even if in the long term the house is going to be torn down.
And that's a good point. So often those systems can pay for themselves within a few years, 5 years, 6, 7 years. But if you take advantage of some of the zero interest loans and the smart payments, you could actually be cash positive on day one. So not actually have to take out, actually have to spend more in a month. It's still a economic question for some people, but it's a good point.
So, Stephen, question. I think a couple people have now identified a valid concern. I'd love to put solar on my house. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, and I'm concerned that the house is going to get torn down after the fact. I know of a house specifically not that far from me that had solar on the house, and it was raised by a developer, and the solar panels were thrown out. Could we create some type of a, just like we've got the swap right at the dump, is there any way for us to maybe create some type of a, if there is, then, reclaim, recycle? Because there's people that could look to use secondhand panels, right? Where all we would be doing would be asking the developers to save them, right? They're paying per ton to throw the stuff in the landfill anyway. It's not like these things are not light. Just an idea that has come to my mind as people are addressing this thing. I don't know if there's any way for us to create some type of a secondhand market for that.
I will put that in a pocket. I don't know the answer. Okay, Artie can answer.
So the panels, whenever we take panels off a house, we never throw them out. There's only two paths where they're going to go. Either they are literally going to get recycled, or they're going to get repurposed. We try to repurpose them as much as possible. The fact is, it's not always practical to repurpose it, but there are plenty of projects where you can repurpose them for. I agree with what you're saying on that, because repurposing it is the best thing you could ever do for solar panels, is to repurpose it. But they are not thrown out. They are recycled, and there are fees for recycling it, but they are recycled. At a minimum, at least we recycle them, but we try to repurpose them.
Developer comes in, big backhoe thing, whatever, big buck thing, they're just going to knock the house down. They're not decommissioning the solar panels. They're just knocking the house down. We don't mandate per building code when a house gets knocked down that if it has solar panels, those have to be decommissioned first. But we could.
I can't say I know for a fact what actually has to be done from a regulatory standpoint. I know that we recycle them or repurpose them. I don't know if there are any options for literally throwing them in a landfill. I don't know that. So I can't answer that one then.
Yeah. Might be a business idea.
Hi, my name is Lynn Klatt. I had heard that California had reduced or eliminated their SREC program. So a lot of people I know here who do have solar panels are really concerned about that because they rely on that to be able to afford their solar panels. Is that a possibility in Massachusetts?
I haven't heard it here. I've heard that the issue in California has to do with too much supply on solar. Michael, do you have more insight into that? My understanding that there was too much supply and that they were overwhelming the grid, and so they wanted to.
Yeah, in essence, California was too successful. And so they felt, the point of the SREC program, or a program like that California had, was to incent people to do it. They were incredibly successful. And so they removed that because they actually had too much solar. The RSREC program is sunsetting, and it's replaced by a different program. But they're not going to take away from people who have it, and the SMART program is still in force because we don't have that problem of having too much residential solar. Right. So there's not really a lot of incentive from a regulatory or a legislative point of view to diminish the solar incentives here in Massachusetts because we still need more. California just doesn't need more residential. In fact, it's now so affordable in California that people can do it pretty much without the incentives. So that's why that happened there.
Other questions? Over here, Gabby.
In your proposal, you, I think, forecasted to have it carbon neutral Needham by 2050. Why did you pick 2050? My gut feeling, humanity may not exist by 2050. Again, I can't predict the future. Is there any scientific basis? I'd like to put a little side note on it. Yesterday, Fauci, the Surgeon General, predicted that 6 foot, when there was COVID around, we all had to keep 6 foot bases and everybody followed it, but there was no scientific basis. So why 2050? Why not 2030 or 2035?
Right. Yeah, I think you're getting at the difference between the scientific consensus and the political consensus. So 2050 is the political consensus. 2050 is what the state has mandated that the Massachusetts be net zero on. Most scientists would say that's far too late. So I think this underscores the importance of us prioritizing this and trying to get as much of it done ahead of time as possible. I've heard people say, well, 2050, we could wait until 2040. But that's not the way it works. That means that we're pumping a lot of CO2 up there for the next decade and a half that we don't get a chance to pull back, right? So political consensus is that we should be doing it now. We probably should have done it 20, 30 years ago. I'm sorry, the scientific consensus. I just misspoke. You saw it. Thank you. So scientific consensus is that we're already late, very late. In fact, what I just read today is that they're already forecasting that we will blow past the 1.6 degrees centigrade sometime in the next decade. That we're already past the 1.5 once, we'll probably be past 1.5 again in the next 5 years, and then permanently above 1.5 and 1.6 very soon. And that's when they have already said that some of the worst impacts of climate change start to accumulate. Things like crops not growing, right? Things like the ocean being cleared out of food. Big things that will cause big, bad problems for humans, not just about polar bears. So I do think you make a very good point, but we were chartered to meet specifically the state mandated 2050 goals, and that's why we're at that. If we do it sooner, fantastic. We still have 8 billion other people on the planet that need to do that as well. So it's more about let's get started. That's what this is about. Let's get started. And then we'll readjust. And maybe there'll be some major technological innovations in the next decade that really help turn the tide for us. But we can't wait. We need to get started. So.
Hi, Eleanor Rossellini. I just had 2 comments. One of them is that 2 friends' houses, one from 1950 and one built in 1920, 1,700 or so square feet, did sell to families. So I don't think, I know every house is an individual case, but there are older homes that are kind of old-fashioned that are still being sold on the market. And also, we're in a situation where some old solar panels have to come down. It's a long story, but we are working with a place in Somerville that is repurposing or recycling. So because most people, still have functioning solar panels, it doesn't come up that much, but I think that's going to be developing in the future. Right. So we were glad to find a local place that could do that for us.
Great. Thank you for bringing that hope after my doom and gloom statement a minute ago. I do think, I want to reiterate, I hope that you're proud of the Climate Action Roadmap, because it is, for me, it's a symbol of hope that we're doing something as a community collectively. We prioritized it. When I think just about the science, I get very depressed. But acting and moving in a direction and adjusting and hopefully getting unexpected positive surprises along the way, that's the only way that I know to keep going. So thanks for your optimism.
Hi, Steve. Ray Williams. One of the 6 elements was resilience and public health. Can you speak a little bit more about that one?
Sure. So public health and resilience has to do with both like how do we protect our physical infrastructure and how do we protect people, for lack of a better summary. So thinking about, for example, where do we in new buildings put the HVAC units and the critical infrastructure to support that building when we know that flooding is becoming an issue. Things like our drainage ditches, right? Where's the excess water going to flow, and how are we going to manage it and control it to minimize damage to private property? So that's resilience. But also things like if we're expecting more and more heat waves, what are we doing as a town to prepare for that so that we have cooling centers for people who don't have AC in their house? Right? That's an example. How are we making sure that we have backup power for the for the storm outages that are more likely to happen when you have more severe storms in the future. All of that kind of falls into that. And so each one of those is captured in a different action in the roadmap as a recommendation. Oh, one of them, I'm just going to pitch right now. If you're not on the Rave 911 town, you should sign up. And how do you do that? Do you know?
I believe that should be on the town main page of the website.
Yeah.
So if you scroll to the bottom, you should see that.
So that's an example of the town helping to reach people faster when there is an emergency. So if you've never used it, you get an alert like right away. But you got to opt into it. And then if you see problems like a sewer that's overflowing during a rainstorm, I think it's See-Click Fix.
Yes, See-Click Fix.
See-Click Fix, which is a mobile app you can take out on your phone, and it goes directly into DPW, right? DPW would.
Yes.
And they would get a little job ticket right away. I got to go clean out that. So those are the types of things that are also recommended. Little things, big things.
Rick Devereaux. Something you just mentioned made me think of stormwater. And is the town looking at this, at the stormwater management system? I can tell you that in Natick, Lake Cochituate is already closed because of bacteria. It opened Memorial Day and it lasted about one weekend.
Yeah. So there's a lot of investment in stormwater management at the town. I know the town meeting just approved some funding. I can't remember the specific part of the project, but I think we're going to be spending a lot of time and money as a town on stormwater management over the coming decade.
I can add a little bit to that. There's a stormwater capacity plan that was funded at town meeting. And so that project will be kicking off soon. And so that's going to look not just at stormwater quality, which has been a focus because of our compliance with the federal MS4 permit, NIPTES permit, but now we'll be looking at capacity. So as we're seeing these more extreme precipitation events, we need to capture more water more quickly. That evaluation will be occurring. And I will also add ongoing stormwater management projects in the community. We're actively investigating both state and federal grant opportunities to help supplement some of those. But this is an issue that is at the forefront, I would say, of all members of our staff.
I should have known to turn to you on that question. I got to get used to the fact that Gabby knows the answer to every one of these questions. Other questions? All right, I think we're actually just about at time, and we did promise that we would be out of here at 7 o'clock. But I do thank you for coming. Your questions were great. Thank you for your engagement. Please stay involved. Please reach out to the town if you have any ideas, and reach out to Gabby as well. Thank you all.